Welcome.
The Pathology Innovation Collaborative Community is a regulatory science initiative that aims to facilitate innovations in pathology, as well as advance safety and effectiveness evaluation. The PI Collaborative Community aims to harmonize approaches to speed delivery to patients through collaboration in the pre-competitive space. The PIcc is open to all stakeholders, public or private, including but not limited to academia, industry, healthcare providers, patients, and advocacy groups. Meetings of this kind are an example of lawful activity under federal antitrust law, because the focus of the meeting is on government action or policy, including the industry's responses or positions taken with respect thereto. However, antitrust monitoring is needed for companies' own protection, since they are direct competitors meeting together. These meetings need to stay within protected subject matters and need to be monitored so that they do not stray off into inappropriate areas, such as pricing and price terms, sales and service territories for particular products, customers and customer territories, each company's individual decisions regarding selection of suppliers or customers, marketing plans and especially future marketing plans or new product offerings, other proprietary or competitively sensitive information. Today's meeting will follow the written agenda, and there will be no discussion of pricing or other prohibited topics. If the discussion veers into those topics, we will terminate the discussion. If you have any questions or concerns about the propriety of a discussion, please raise it immediately, and we will take a break to determine how best to proceed. The Medical Device Innovation Consortium acts as the formal convener, and we will follow their conflict of interest policy. For additional information, we defer to our Code of Conduct and our website, www.pathologyinnovationcc.org. We look forward to moving the field forward.
Over. All right. Ola keeps me and everyone on track. So let's get started here. Let me just share my screen. So, in case you're not aware where you are, that's always a very good thing to start with, is the Pathology Innovation Collaborative Community. This is the monthly steering committee. And can you see my screen? Yep, perfect. So, one thing that I wanted to mention, and that happened. So, for everyone who made it to LA, the United States and Canadian Association for Pathology meeting happened. It was great. We had a PIcc meeting, and if you were there, it was fantastic. If you couldn't make it, it wasn't actually that good. You know, like, so I don't want to make you feel bad if you couldn't make it, but, you know, as you can tell, a lot of people that we haven't seen in a while. There was a great reception outdoors, and you could see pathologists dancing. I don't know if you're into that, but that's a weird, strange thing to witness, but, you know, why not? But I just wanted to mention that it was great to see everyone back live again. And, you know, as a quick side note, 2 years ago, that was our last in-person PIcc meeting. I'm actually up here directly above the hotel bar. There was an FDA inter-rater variability study happening, and it was very, very interesting to be back. So just a quick shout out for everyone who made it, and hope to see you. I think next year NewsCap is in New Orleans, so should be good as well. So next quick thing here, and I know you all know that one of our big things for 2022 is that we want to increase our engagement with patient advocacy groups. And the first section here, which is sort of an update on 3 of these patient advocacy groups. And the first shout out is to one of the people who's on call, which is Tony Anthony Blau, who's, you know, for this paper here. There's also a second paper that we feature here, which is from Suzanne Schrant and Michael Cantor, thanking, that's kind of like the theme sort of for this set of slides, the patients and all their advocacy groups for their role in pushing research in a larger sort of cultural change. And if I'm thinking right, I believe, Ulla, you're pasting this in the chat, right? I can't see it right now, but of course you are. Fantastic. So the thing that I wanted to briefly turn over to Tony, so this is a paper that I think you should read, but there's also something behind the paper, which is All for Cure, which there will be a link in the chat as well. And that is Tony's company, and they have sort of a unique vision. And, of course, we tried to get Tony to join PIcc to have another patient advocacy group as part of that. But Tony, do you want to say a few words quickly about what your vision is? And
you bet.
Very impressive
Thank
study.
You. No, thanks so much, Joe. I'm really, and Ula, thanks very much for inviting me to join everyone here. So my background is I've been a professor and a researcher and a hematologist at the University of Washington for 30 years, mainly doing research, seeing patients a little bit of the time. And back probably around 2010, I started to become really interested in trying to figure out what would it mean to do the very best the world could do for a patient with a terrible, incurable cancer. And the paper that's shown here that after a lot of effort, a lot of rejections and revisions, finally appeared, represents what we thought would be the best that you could do for a patient with one of the most aggressive incurable cancers, metastatic triple negative breast cancer. And so this really describes, the efforts across 31 patients of trying to bring as much scientific rigor as possible while to each patient, while allowing for each patient to be able to access pretty much any test that we thought might shed light on their treatment. So that's what that paper describes. And then I myself, after a couple of years after our first patient was enrolled in this study, I myself developed multiple myeloma, which is also an incurable disease, but differs from metastatic triple negative breast cancer in that, the good news behind a diagnosis of myeloma is there are many new treatments to choose from. And with that came the dilemma of trying to figure out which treatments I should choose as a patient at a particular point in my illness. And what I most wanted to know is what did every other patient with myeloma choose to do and what were their outcomes? And because that information didn't exist, I started All for Cure. And so All for Cure is aiming to take cancer from what we call a single player activity of one doctor, one patient in a room trying to make the best decision, to a multiplayer activity with many doctors, many patients collectively leading, I think, to much faster progress in cancer research and treatment. So thank you.
Tony, amazing life story and pathway that you have, walked and now helped many people. So please take a look at the study here by Burton et al. I think there are many, many different lessons for us, one of course about, safety and feasibility, but also clinical utility demonstration for cutting edge technology. So for those who wonder how to demonstrate that for digital pathology, which is, Tony, just one of the things that we care a lot about, how to digitize slides and get access to that, some AI tools and, other things. So I think this is a phenomenal blueprint, and again, thanks for pushing the boundary, because I think that study is really phenomenal in that aspect. And hopefully we can gain you and your constituents as hopefully members of this community, which is a conglomerate of people interested in all kinds of innovations. So that would be great to count you in. All right, let's move on. The next sort of element, and I know we're jumping a bit, so patient advocacy we return to in a moment, but I wanted to make sure, because Tony has to leave to another obligation, that we have this. So one update here is from the work group and or project about the national tokenization mechanism and unique patient identifiers. That's an element that is, of course, near and dear to several of the people caring about metadata. You may remember that there was a key change by the Committee on Appropriations that allows funding to be allocated to this topic that has previously been excluded. There have been bills introduced to the Senate about, certain national patient identifier rules and or repeal acts. So we abstain from commenting on what's good or bad, but the National Tokenization Mechanism work group has figured out sort of a way on how to potentially allow data sharing using tokens. And it would be great to, I just wanted to point this out. There's a lot of information on the website under that project. So given that we're all sharing data for research, you know that during the pandemic, many states have moved forward with privacy laws at the state level. So this definitely becomes very interesting. So if you haven't seen it, please take a look at that project and the information that's available there. I think this is sort of a continued component there. There's a patient ID now, a proposed blueprint, and then of course the counterposition, the repeal act. So both are featured very neutral. If you feel strongly about portraying one or the other perspective a little more strongly, please take a look at the website. So I can briefly pull this up here. I think this is sort of what that system is, what it entails, and what the links are. So please comment and use the usual emails and connection mechanisms so that we can improve that further. Next, patient advocacy and advocacy-related group is Apia. That is a anatomic pathology patient interest association, and as one of the delegates to Apia, I went to attend their board meeting at the USCAP meeting and presented a combined project proposal that was named Yin and Yang, because pre-analytics and analytics really interface when it comes to these, meaningful projects. So I presented this, the board took that home, made a decision to consider whether they would join us as well. So that would mean that Apia would be another sort of association with a strong patient advocacy interest that would join PIcc for future projects, and there may also be funding for some of the pre-analytic studies. We get to that in a second, but I just wanted to mention that was well received, and there are many opportunities for working together. So we will follow up. And, to quickly go back, so these topics here, the one with All for Cure with Tony, probably invite him for a talk to dive in a little bit deeper than just that scratch on the surface. And probably we do the same with Apia, just to fulfill our big vision for 2022. I don't know if there are questions about that, but hopefully that's relatively self-explanatory. Next item was a winter 2022 White House Office of Public Engagement seminar. I don't know if some of you were able to make it. So this is one of the Biden administration's key elements for getting people access to all kinds of benefits. So one of these sessions was the telehealth equity and broadband access. It was a combined talk and public discussion session with a panel discussion, and clearly outlining that telehealth maintenance of the things that have been accomplished during the pandemic is one of the key elements in the post-COVID priorities of the administration. So in contrast to some of the prior statements, we walk everything back. There is a fact sheet that will be released by the White House. I think it may have been already. I haven't checked this morning, but so clearly telehealth and anything that can be tied to it would hopefully fall in line with what we're currently doing. So specifically speaking about digital pathology, I think that's an excellent use case for why we shouldn't revert back to former rules of, applying for a separate lab license if you're reviewing slides at home. So I think that we have to wait for the exact fact sheet what that will mention. But given that we worked on this before, it would be great to synergize with this telehealth equity proposal that will soon come out. So this was a pointer to this. So if you can probably Google it under this name string or noun string, and then you will find more details about it. Next topic we wanted to briefly outline is that this is more for the machine learning practice. So, of course, in October there was a joint statement, across country lines released, referred to as GMLP. That's in synergy to the good manufacturing practices and the ISO standard. Here it's towards what people consider good machine learning practice. And when reading through this sort of like mini blue box here, you will see that many of these guiding principles are relatively top level, 10,000 foot perspective. What this means for digital pathology remains to be determined, but I just wanted to point out that there is an FDA docket for commenting that has been open for a while, but it's still open. And I wanted to point out that these comments that are on this docket are very, very insightful. So this is kind of a pointer to many of the representatives from other associations, so CAP, DPA, etc. If you haven't seen this, I point, for example, to a comment from Intel. So Intel Corporation has put a comment out there about good machine learning practices. That's an excellent summary of the key practical problems that go a little bit deeper than these guiding principles, but actually says sort of in daily practice of machine learning coders and web developers, what does that look like? So pointing it out, I think this may still be open. I don't know, Ola, if you have the link to this, but if not, you can probably find it through Google. But that's a, I don't know, important topic if you're into regulation for machine learning. Related to our payer strategies group, we had many meetings. I see Eric Lin is on the call. I know Esther can't make it today, but Laura Lassiter was also on many of the calls. I know many others as well. So one of the things that was co-hosted by Stanford and Duke was a webinar, March 28th, so just a few days ago, Monday, about transitional coverage for emerging technologies. So if we all agree that machine learning and digital pathology, or the coupling of both, is an emerging technology, and we have a problem getting cost containment for that right now in clinical practice, this may be, if that's of interest to you, may be very interesting to many. Some of the researchers that presented have also published on this before, and one paper here by Ruggles et al., which is the need for accelerated Medicare coverage for some of these new technologies, we point out specifically, and there's a full transcript of this session available. So briefly, whether or not something is covered by CMS ultimately depends on numerous vectors, one of which is evidence, but another one is, of course, also the evidence from the real world, like what we've generated. So this comes back to what we probably accomplished during the pandemic, which is using digital pathology for broader access in clinical practice. So using that data to drive, hopefully, transitional coverage to, further sustain digital pathology may be an option. So a quick pointer to this, and of course all the material will be available, and I think Ola is pasting the link. The next section, very briefly, I think the early 2022 timeframe was, at least from our perspective, what we received in terms of emails, links, and pointers, extremely impressive when it comes to papers and content. So was very hard to select, so please don't be offended if the paper that you sent us is not featured here, but we kept it at 5. And some of those are more genomics, but I wanted to point out a few. One is by Couture et al., image analysis with deep learning to predict breast cancer, great, ER status, histologic subtype, and intrinsic subtype. So this is covering basically the full gamut of morphology, of IHC, of course histologic subtype, so the histotype, and the intrinsic subtype, which refers to the gene expression-based classifier, so luminal A, etc. It's a phenomenal paper, so I think just to quickly show you one element from the PDF, if I can find it quickly here. So the ultimate, one of the key findings here, if you look at the overall histologic subtype, for example, optimized for specificity and accuracy, with very, very good sensitivity. And this is, I don't know, hopefully a pointer in the right direction. I just wanted to quickly emphasize this because it was really good. Another paper that was covering Revi et al. Current problems and perspectives on color in medical imaging. I put here a calibration slide just for those who care about color. And, if you allow me to quickly show one of the features in that paper, and, color management and, figuring this out is sort of like, what the cameras are built for, what mobile devices can use, of course, Petri plate imaging and microbiology. So it's a pretty good overview paper that was sent to us, and I just wanted to mention that part. Now to 3 papers that are absolutely mind-bending. One is Bergstrom et al. This was outlining some of the genomic signatures. If you haven't seen it, it's a phenomenal paper outlining the quality and the complexity of broad-scale genomic signatures. 2 more quick things. Kobayashi et al. Demonstrated that certain hotspot mutations only turn into actual pathogenic variants when accompanied with a silent mutation nearby. I don't know if that makes sense, but for example, the KRAS Q61 mutation is only pathogenic if a silent mutation is affecting the nucleotide nearby. It's extremely hard to show if you think about it, how to design an experiment like that. They used an EGFR mutant cell line and CRISPRed in some of these existing variants with and without, and showed whether that has the ability to be inhibited by osimertinib. Amazing experiment and a very cool finding that will probably change our view of silent mutations forthcoming. And then the last paper, which is a completely new, it's a substitution probably, the change of presence of one amino acid versus another can lead to substitutions. So this basically closes the paradigm of nutrition versus nature and or genomics. So another phenomenal paper. I think these were, I don't know if this is applicable to digital pathology yet. I think some of these findings are definitely probably going to be looked at, whether that leaves a footprint in the morphology. But again, sort of one sort of breast cancer predictor, color imaging, and then 3 genomics papers that will have probably some lasting impact. Moving forward and leaving ample time for some discussion afterwards, are a couple of news and events. And I know a lot of you are probably thinking going to AACR and ASCO. But I wanted to mention a few things that we have planned. One thing had to be likely delayed. We may need to delay this further. So we had a session on whether AI grant challenges can inform regulatory science. And this was Francesco Ciompi and Roberto Salgado who gave the seminar. It's recorded and available on the website. Unfortunately, at the time, we didn't have time to allow questions. So we wanted to dedicate a full hour just to questions and how we could possibly harness that, because there's a lot of AI challenges ongoing. So currently the session is planned for April. We may further postpone it because we would like to have a lot of participation from the FDA as well. And it seems to be tricky to get, everyone aligned, because both Roberto and Francesco are, of course, European time, and finding a time to work for both. So currently this is an envisioned date, but again, we may need to postpone that further. But if you're interested in that, please consider joining and providing input. A couple of other sort of pointers here. The API Summit in Pittsburgh will happen in person. I haven't heard anything otherwise, and I just confirmed. So this will be an in-person conference in May. The abstract deadline is still coming up. I don't know exactly when it is. Should have probably looked that up. But so if you consider that one of the key digital pathology conferences, so that's the API Summit in Pittsburgh. We have a presentation featuring Renato Umithorn and Jacob Rosenthal from Dana-Farber. They have a program and tool set called PathML. and they agreed to present this probably in June. So this will be one of the probably web-based events that PIcc will host about their machine learning application and what to do. And then, of course, the next steering committee will be on April 27th. So that's coming up roughly in a month. And here's the time, usually as always, last Wednesday in a month. So I think this was all of the move the patient advocacy slide back here so that we have the slide deck as it will be on the website. So that was sort of the update, and many have asked that we leave more time for questions and answers and general topics. So, hey, Shannon.
Hey, I do have one piece of news that might be relevant to this group. So the next CLIAC meeting is coming up in mid-April, and I believe one of the topics of discussion is going to be remote review for pathology. Right now, CMS is using enforcement discretion and allowing pathologists to review from their living rooms, but that's tied to the public health emergency. So I think there's going to be discussion on trying to extend that beyond the PHE.
Do you think it's worth putting something out on the website, what we think about it for consideration?
I think the more push that we get on this, the higher the probability it's going to happen. It's kind of funny. Everyone I talk to, up to and including the CLIA director, all realize that this is a no-brainer, but it's just a matter of how to make it happen, at the speed of government, which isn't as always quickly as we would like it to be. But yeah, I think the more groups that, advocate for allowing remote review, the better.
Yeah, so I just pasted the link. We had a project under the catchy name CLIA waiver, which is of course not a CLIA waiver. It's just like, I don't know, the noun string that stuck, but whatever the health emergency or enforcement discretion rule is to making that permanent would be great. Thank you for sharing, Shen. That's very helpful. So we could probably revisit that, what the specific recommendation is that we would make from a digital pathology perspective. I think that's probably the most relevant. But I think, as we discussed before, there are also the aspects of remote review, remote keying out, right? Those are different risk layers to that. So it would be very helpful to have the group's input in making sort of specific recommendations related to that. Hey, Mike. Oh, he disappeared again. Any opinions about that? Any other suggestions? Because that's probably the right group to address, right? The CLIA group is probably the group that will provide the adequate input and has the right leverage.
I agree with that. Thanks. Sorry, I'm listening to another meeting. I have dual meetings going on, but yeah, I agree with that. I think the CLIA group, the work group we assemble is a great one to offer recommendations.
Yeah, so
they do allow public comments. They like them about 5 days prior to the meeting, so that'd be on around April 8th. So if this group wanted to make a formal opinion to the CLIAC meeting, that would be the deadline. Alternatively, just making information available on the website.
That's really helpful, actually. I was thinking, do we have any folks from CAP? API can certainly alert the troops there too, but I thought maybe Helena Duncan, I don't know if she's on the call, she would be
Mary Kennedy and Kevin on.
Yeah, Kevin too. Yes.
Yeah, this is Mary. I actually just took that link and sent it on to Helena, asking what our role is. So I don't have an answer right now.
I think we could round up the troops before and just have a meeting of the minds, and we just come up with a cohesive voice to put 5 days before the meeting. I think that would be great, because we formalize a lot of stuff on those video recordings that we did in the past, there was a lot of good, ideas thrown out, and we could probably summarize those for a statement.
I can draft a statement, because I think despite 3 separate meetings and a lot of different discussions, there was no big objection against it. I mean, we have to come up with that there should be some sort of way to regulate it so it's not going completely crazy. But at the same time, it shouldn't be that every single living room requires a CMS 116 form and a formal inspection with audits, right? I think that's like the 2 extremes. So somewhere in the event horizon, it should be somewhere in the middle. And that I think I can draft something and send it around to the, I don't know, should we just say today's steering committee, or should I propose to send it out to full membership?
Full membership. I mean, just alert. Some people may not be involved. This might drag a lot of people into it. I think this is really resonating with people.
Yeah, so I think having enough patient advocacy groups join as well, we can address those separately to just make sure that people understand, because generally speaking, like more control, more regulation usually comes with the added bonus of it feels safer, etc. But having, several patient advocacy groups who join these calls and understand what we're trying to accomplish join in, that may be helpful. So let's just draft something and then we send it out. And then, so I think there was a question from Kevin, what was the formal deadline? So it's usually 5 days before the meeting, correct?
5 business days. I posted the information from the website.
Perfect. So probably that's a good weekend activity. So we probably send it out Monday. And would that be sufficient? Sorry, I didn't check the actual deadline. So 5. So it would be April 7th. Am I reading this right? 5 or 8? Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
It's
the weekend email it is. No, thank you,
Yeah.
Shannon. That's amazing. Amazing to have that option.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, for summarizing it too.
All right. Other topics. Such a quiet group. What's going on?
I was going to introduce one. I might have to chime in this other meeting, but the information blocking was a pretty hot topic on API in terms of, kind of the different rules about information blocking. Kind of putting a task force. I know the Alliance here is involved. I haven't formalized it yet, but I'm working on it. So I didn't know if people had any thoughts about that, but thought about writing kind of a statement, kind of a position statement.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely have a ton of info out here as well. So just pointing to it in case you haven't seen it. So I know ADASP has dedicated half a day session to this topic. And, there may be another group to reach out to. And Joe, I know you're on another meeting, but were you thinking of a publication or just putting it out sort of on the website?
Well, let me make sure they're not going to ask me something, but well, at least at the very least, I was thinking for API. So selfishly for API, putting a position statement for API, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the same statement for everybody, but harmonizing our message would be nice. So we're already doing the effort. Why not just meet all the minds? If we have a consensus among the organizations, it's even better.
Johnny Hancock asks, has anyone done a study during the emergency measures to compare performance of remote versus on-premises pathologists reviewing? I think in one session we discussed sort of this, because compare performance requires a measure. Do you have an idea, Johnny, what you meant with performance?
Well, no, not specifically, just really throwing the idea out there, because I guess evidence is, what it's all about in convincing people. So, but it's the right thing to do.
So the study by MSK comes to mind, and I think that was sort of part validation, but not aware whether someone really defined sort of concordance in a concrete term. You know, if someone uses remote review and calls something grade 2 versus on slide grade 3, and whether that is higher than the natural variability.
I suppose the closest reference point would be the studies, the sort of studies that were done, you know, pre and post digitization. I'm not sure what measures were used on those, but I know people like Darren Triana did some studies on that, I think.
So we had a discussion at the ADAST meeting in sort of a smaller group, where people said we could easily run the number of amendments that happened during digital versus non-digital review periods. I mean, amendments are an imperfect measure for any kind of, you know, diagnostics, but that at least means, you know, was it higher or lower? But that was an indirect surrogate. Yeah. No, but I think you're right. With appropriate evidence, that is the page prostate FDA approval. Keith is asking, has anybody seen the FDA summary statement on the page prostate FDA approval? Anyone know?
I don't think it's there. Just it's last year. It's been over 6 months. Just wondering.
It's accessible now.
Awesome.
Could you? I will. I don't know if I'll be able to find it immediately, but
yeah, and if you could paste it in, it'd be awesome. And manuscript. Anybody seen a manuscript yet on the studies they did? No. Okay. I just said the letter was posted right away, but I never saw the summary statement.
From what I saw, it's heavily redacted.
Sorry, I missed the question, but was the question about maybe what does the FDA approve with the page prostate? Because they're playing around with it being an MSK and such. But my understanding is the FDA approval is really for cancer detection. The other parts about quantitation and Gleason scoring, it's not approved. In fact, it's probably not been shown to the FDA yet. It's just the cancer detection part of the prostate algorithm.
Yeah.
No, I think the question is the summary statement. So to learn a bit what they've done.
Right.
So kind of like, I think I don't know, Keith, if that's what you're aiming for, but for others to see what the FDA is looking for and what not. I mean, that's the key question. So I think so the summary statements are usually a good indicator. It will not allow for every intended use or for every indication of use, but you know.
Yeah, totally. And also, if you see that the sequential is interesting, right? The pathology review first, and then the algorithm is kind of like a supporting there. And also it's defined the intended use set not for primary diagnosis. So that's also interesting to read from there, yeah.
Jinsung, did you see the summary report on the web?
Yes.
Yeah, if you could, if you could paste it in the chat.
Oh, yeah, I can paste it.
It didn't, I didn't dig hard, but it didn't come up on a Google search. And I looked every few months or so. But yeah,
it's a little bit later than it used to be, right? 90 days you should put there, but this time it takes almost half a year. Yeah, I'll put it there.
No, thank you. I had to mention that because, one of the premises on which this group was founded, Joe, you can clarify, but was, the approval of AI tools through regulatory mechanisms, regulatory science. So I think that it'd be interesting to study it and understand a bit how it influences submissions to come, and how this group can make the biggest impact given that landscape, which is very different than when you started only 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, so the point would also be whether that's sufficient, right? I mean, I know we all aim for something that's, risk averse and safe, but there's certainly good science to be done to support the most appropriate approach to demonstrate whether that is the most fitting solution. Now, this is of course glancing at what the FDA thought at the time, so it would be great to, examine that and see what lessons we can learn from it.
Thanks, Jess, for posting that.
You'll notice on it that it's heavily redacted actually in terms of the number of samples and the spread over the different demographic groups as well, which is a bit disappointing.
Mm-hmm. Would there be interest to host a session to go through this and discuss it sort of from a rec science perspective?
I think so.
Absolutely. First I've ever seen of it, so I look forward to it. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe we can make one session, Ulla, to just say review of that. I mean, if it's publicly available, we can review it and see what would that mean for a, for example, local validation study, right? Or, you know, of course, there's probably some interest in, you know, whether, you know, the numbers, the approach, and the intended use, maybe the risk classification, size of the training and tuning and test data set, right? That's provided there, so.
Cool.
All right. Mary, Kevin, anything good going on with CAP? I know you've been very active. I think I saw that the other day, there's like a big, what is it, leadership policy summit coming up in DC, right?
There is, and we actually do have two different courses we're putting on there. So we have an AI ethics discussion. Apologies, I'd have to look at the agenda to tell you which day of the week that's on, and then we have a presentation the following day to kind of discuss some of the standards which we think future AI tools will be built upon. So it's kind of a standard slate without digging too technical into things like DICOM and anything HL7, SNOMED, LOINC, etc.
This is end of April, right? I think I have the link here.
Yes, I think that's the first day, so crosses April, May.
Yeah, April, May. No, that's great.
Laughing a little bit with PIcc XGM.
What else is new? Any other comments? I know Brandon is gone this week. Victor, anything good? And also, sorry for calling straight up. All right. Nothing else? Then let's conclude this. We have a couple of things to do. I think the weekend email related to a CLIAC comment is probably highest priority, and then, you know, the machine learning / page prostate review. I'm sure we can reach out to some of the page folks and MSK folks to join that call to maybe help us understand some of the approaches that they took. And yeah, thanks a lot for joining. Great meeting and great input. Thanks again, Shannon, for pointing out the CLIAC meeting. I missed it somehow. All right. Have a great